Hi, everybody. This is Liz Fickensher from Ecommerce. I'm the e-commerce marketing manager here, and I enjoy having chats with my industry friends. And this is one of my very best industry friends, Chris McCabe of eCommerceChris. Chris, say hello.
I'm honored to be one of your closest friends. I won't
You
say your closest in
are.
the industry. How are you?
And in IRL too. IRL, real friends for real.
Yes. Real world
So
as well.
today, I'm not going to be asking Chris all of the pesky questions I usually ask him about account suspension on Amazon and ASIN variation problems and all the other crazy questions we all get in the e-commerce industry because Chris is an expert on those things, and we will touch on that. Today, we're going to get to know Chris a little bit, and I'll know a little bit about his history, what led him into the e-commerce field, and all that kind of stuff. So, Chris, when did your e-commerce journey start? Did it start with Amazon, or were you interested in e-commerce before you went to work for Amazon?
No, it was before I went to work for Amazon. So we're going back 20 years. Come back with me, 22 decades
Come
to
along.
2000. So my first experience was in the bubble part. So when all these startups are springing up, um, a company that was interestingly later acquired by Amazon, eHobbies, which some people remember, some people don't. Um, what is my backstory? So I lived in Los Angeles for a while at the turn of the century.
I'm sorry. Kidding,
No, I
kidding.
was I was in working on the production side of TV and film and commercials and stuff. And in those days, a lot of competition for jobs, and obviously the industry was moving up to Canada to shoot a lot of stuff. Not as much stuff shooting around town in LA. So I had to find other avenues of. It was really at first just a job, like almost like a temp job, just data entry. And this is how I got into fraud prevention. Actually, was through eHobbies and through e-commerce sites that sprung up in the boom time. So credit card verifications, right? Somebody's buying $400 of stuff. Something doesn't look right, and maybe this is a stolen card. So I was just there to do like the calls to the bank, the call to the credit card company, the call sometimes to the owner, quote unquote, owner of the card, which of course they're not likely to pick up if they're not the owner and they just give you a bogus phone number. But occasionally I would talk to the fraudsters themselves who were trying to spin it when they realized that their orders were about to be canceled.
Wow.
This is way back when. Yeah. I mean, they were doing this, the buyer teams at Amazon were doing this in those early days too. When I later worked at Amazon, I met people on the seller side who started on the buyer side really doing, I mean, this is pre-seller marketplace work. So they were like working on approving orders, and they were working downtown Seattle, but not one of these fancy buildings Amazon has now, like one of these, the ceilings leaking. Um, I heard stories about people who were working in like basements where occasionally things would scurry by behind them. 1999, 2000, 1998. Yeah. Um, I have a couple of friends who have been at Amazon since the 90s. I have a couple of friends still there. And when I'm in Seattle, non pandemic times, in visiting Seattle, I see them occasionally. So 2 decades ago, e-commerce journey begins.
That's crazy. That's 2 decades ago. So
Yep.
you started working at Amazon in 2006 as a claims investigator
A
for
to Z guarantee. Yeah. Yep.
buyer protection. So what was that like? Because that was a whole different time than the time we have
Totally
now.
different. You had to read the seller side of the claim, the buyer side of the claim. Sometimes sellers were so busy selling that they didn't even notice they had a claim. Like Seller Central, the portal was different in those days. It was probably easy to miss these emails. It might go in your spam or something. So
Sure.
they'd come back like a week later saying, "Why did you fault me for this claim? I didn't even read it." So we had stories like that, but a lot of it was just weighing both sides. It's basically being a judge. And like you'd have in a court case, you'd say, I don't have enough information to make a judgment here. Like, people, where's my stuff, right? Well, it says there was a signature. Well, that's not my signature. I would have to ask some questions and poke around. The most interesting thing, which I did not know from just buying books or DVDs on Amazon before that job, was that a bunch of claims they would call it funding the claim, which was just like Amazon will pay for it. neither side gets penalized. We make both sides happy, right? They're building up trust in buyers buying from sellers, which wasn't there in those days, not yet. So you didn't want either side to walk away stung or feeling ugly about things. Obviously, there's a dollar amount for that forgiveness. It was maybe
Sure.
$50, under $50, $25. I mean, there were claims for like $5 items. And what they taught me in the first day was the time you would spend wasted on looking at a $5 claim is not worth it. $5, your time is worth more than, for that minute that it takes you to fund a $5 claim is worth more than $5. So we'll pay it. That's how it was back then. Don't hurt the buyer's feelings, don't hurt the seller's feelings. If it's a low dollar amount, it's worth it more to keep them in the ecosystem and not discourage them from participating. Obviously, you get up to 50, 75, $100, you weren't supposed to. I funded a couple of claims. Amazon funded a couple of claims that were like 100, 125. And my boss at the time was like, yeah, we don't want to get in the habit of doing that. But, you know, the frugality, that one of the core principles of Amazon, right? Frugality. So it wasn't just door desks. It was the, you know, don't give away some money. Don't give away all of the money.
Or much money.
We're going to need that money later. Yeah.
So you got promoted pretty quickly to investigation specialist.
No, I changed. So I didn't get promoted right away. I changed roles from buyer side or claims to seller side work. And then I was doing what they call these velocity exams. Like, should we let people sell more per week, per month? You'd have to raise the limit. Some sellers understand velocity exams now. I mean, it's not that interesting to talk about, but it was just looking at their order history and deciding, like, do we trust these guys? Can we give them a little bit more leeway here to sell? Or do we need to see, you know, some more track record? That's all it was.
Right.
I did those all day, every day for my first few months, which is like the same rote task, the same boring kind of menus and checking stats, or performance metrics mostly, over and over and over, eight hours a day, all day long. And I did those all day. And it's kind of an interesting sidebar is I didn't have a place to live while I started the seller job, because I wasn't sure when the A to Z guarantee claims job didn't necessarily translate into leaping, you know, a lateral move essentially is what it was, to another team. So I did an interview process for the seller performance job, but I like didn't hear back right away. They like forgot to tell me that they were offering me the job or something. So I planned this trip to Japan. My friend was living in Japan at the time. So by the time I got the official like offer letter, or they were like, why didn't you accept the offer? I said, I never got it. This sounds like a seller talking, right? I had already booked a month-long trip to Japan. So I was like, well, I'm happy to work in seller performance, but I'm going to Japan first. So that was an interesting little, my only Japan trip.
But it was on the seller side of things that you started seeing compliance issues. You had to make sure that the sellers that you were looking at were following all the rules and that they were,
I mean, a lot of it was suspending accounts, closing accounts for relations, like somebody got blocked and they just created a new account. That was a lot of the early work, which is still going on today in a different form. In those days, they were sending more warnings, like slapping the wrist for a policy violation. Again, not trying to just be as aggressive on the suspension side and wholesale just shut everyone down en masse like they do now. In those days, there was a bit more like education, using a warning to educate. Nowadays, they consider warnings pretty useless, and they think that unless they suspend you, you're not going to get the message. A little bit lighter touch in those days. So I did a lot of warnings, like canceling a listing and sending a warning like, hey, you're doing it wrong. You know, don't do it again.
And then did you tell them how to do it right?
I think the messaging was a little bit clearer in the days that I was there. It wasn't, I mean, the murky, generic, watered down, that came later. That came years later, actually. In those days, we didn't really, I mean, it wasn't my call. There were people who had been there for years. from the early days of the marketplace who understood seller education much better than I did, and were teaching me how to kind of, lead people into the, we know that you don't know what you did wrong, but this is wrong. Here's a link to the policy page. Don't, review this. Don't just say, okay. Actually read it and don't do it again.
And you did some work on fraud investigation for Amazon France, and it was in French. So you speak French.
I do.
Say something.
We don't have to speak French on here.
Say something in French.
No. So I have a rule about this because
you don't speak French.
No, people always, I speak French and Italian, and people always say either say something in French or say something in Italian. And in an interview before I joined Amazon, I had an interview for another job in Seattle, and somebody said, "Oh, we see mention of Italian, say something in Italian." So my new rule is, since that's been asked so many times, is I just say, "Dites quelque chose en français." I just say something in French.
Something in French.
Dites quelque chose en français is say something in French. I just take that.
I took French for a long time.
It's kind of my wise ass way of saying, why does everyone
I get it. I took years and years of French, and all I can say is mon vélo là-bas devant le guignol. Oh, c'est chouette le guignol, which is my bike is over there by the puppet theater. Oh, great, the puppet theater. So years of wasted education. I don't even
know if a French person would say it that way. They might not say something like
probably not because it came from the textbook, but that's what I remember.
No, I mean what I said. I don't say they say quelque chose for something, but I'm translating literally. They might say dites quelques mots en français. Say some words in French. Mot is word. So
right.
I might not have even have said that one phrase correctly, but I haven't been to France in a long time. Here's a kind of pandemic spoiler alert for me. The second I feel comfortable getting on a plane again, I'm going to France. Just let everybody know.
I will. I'll go with you.
That's in France. Yeah.
Watch out, France. Chris is coming.
Yeah.
Batten down the hatches.
Yeah. And a new part of France, a part I have not explored yet before. So that's something.
Not a newly created part of France, but a part of France that is
I know
unexplored
Paris
by you.
Yeah. I know Paris very well. I don't spend much time in Paris anymore. I spend time in other parts, other regions that, I don't know. France is a bigger place than maybe some people realize. So I've seen much of it, but not all of it. Getting back to what you were saying, I was the only French speaker in Seattle working on seller stuff.
In all of Seattle.
In all at Amazon. So the part of the company I worked in was TRMS, which is Transaction Risk Management Services. That's what covers this buyer investigation, seller investigation, and other payments and other things. So I was working the Amazon France emails because literally there were only a handful of them that would come in when the guys in the UK weren't working, when they were not on duty or asleep. There would really only be like a dozen or a couple dozen Amazon France seller emails that would have to be answered. So I would have those in my queue and maybe dust those off in the morning before I really got started. As I worked at Amazon years past, later, more French speakers were hired. I mean, things were growing and growing and growing. So we went from one French speaker to 2 to 5 to whatever. And the email queues were, you could spend all day just doing France and UK. So.
And you won the Investigator of the Year award.
Yeah, so back to the promotion. I liked that topic. That was a good question.
Right, because you were promoted in October of 2010.
2010.
Off of your LinkedIn profile.
Yes, took me a couple of years. They were not giving promotions out like candy in those days. Nowadays, I'm sure they have shoes to fill and they move people around and they promote people more or less constantly, I guess. But in those days, they were hard-earned victories, hard fought. Again, Amazon's frugality. Don't spend any money you don't have to. And that's the way they were handling. Obviously, if you got promoted, you got a bump in pay and RSUs, stock option type stuff.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So that was something that they couldn't give to everyone. And they, at that point, I was doing so many investigations an hour, so many investigations a day. And, they had ways of measuring the quality of your work, of course. how effective you were and so forth. After a couple of years, I was also kind of coaching and mentoring other people in terms of how to do this stuff. So yeah, that's where the award season came from. And they bumped me up a level so I could not have direct reports, people like that I had to manage necessarily, but develop projects around how can we do stuff better, how can we improve processes. Most of the improvements we put into place were like probably swept aside later in favor of, hey, we're not getting this done fast enough. We have to prioritize speed over quality. And I think that's kind of been the new mantra is quality takes a back seat and make sure you rush through these investigations. That's not how we did it in those days, even though speed was a component of the job. It always will be. It always was then. We were charged with a hard task, like make sure everyone's going through these seller account investigations quickly, but make sure they're doing a good job. Not an easy thing to do.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So that I think is a nice transition into what you do now, because you formed eCommerceChris in August of 2014.
Yeah.
Because you realized that in the industry, there were sellers getting suspended and it was not necessarily a fair suspension or correct suspension. Is that pretty fair summary?
I would say initially, interestingly, sellers, I didn't have a website. I wasn't like an official company's consultant at that point. I just had my Amazon info on LinkedIn about working on this stuff. Sellers were finding me. I never did any outreach. I didn't officially, I kind of made a job for myself. Yeah, I guess that's true. But I wasn't hanging a shingle yet as a consultant. Everyone was approaching me saying, I need help with this stuff. No one at Amazon will talk to me. And I quickly realized, I thought about this before I left Amazon, but I didn't have a plan in place for like, I'm going to prioritize account suspensions and listing suspensions and coaching on how to learn this stuff the right way. I just fell into it because people were sending me LinkedIn messages back in the day. And from there, I realized account suspensions have gotten tons worse since I left. Communication, the messaging is worse. These are some of the reasons I left Amazon, right? I saw that quality of the work was trending downward. I saw that management was not doing a good job, to be honest. Even the wrong people were managing these teams. And I just saw things were going in the wrong direction. And then by late 2014, I understood that tons of sellers needed help, and they were reaching out to me just like, I don't know what you charge. I don't see your website. I don't know what this costs. This is driving me crazy. We're losing tons of money. I need your help. And we quickly from that, initially, maybe it was listings, just help with like a listing that was down, but we quickly got into the account suspension stuff.
And how things have changed since 2014, because that's when I came into the industry.
Yeah. And I think I met you in 2015. So we're going most of the way back to my beginnings, just talking about where you and I started discussing things. Because in 2015, things really took off, really exploded. That's when things, contacts, emails, people getting to me through my site, more LinkedIn, more email. Those were the days, like even early 2015, I would say, which was a brutal winter here in Massachusetts. We had multiple storms that were 2 feet of snow or more. So I was like in a snow bunker for that winter. And I occasionally would miss calls from clients because I had to like shovel snow off of a roof or something like that. And I'd like go back inside and be like, oh man, because in those days I had maybe a total of a handful of clients, and that was it. And they were desperate for, if you suddenly lose a listing, it's a lightning strike, right? They wouldn't even necessarily say, hey, we're getting a bunch of warnings for these. We're afraid we're going to lose these listings the way it might be now. They would just, I don't know what happened. I got a message, but I don't know what it means. That's when that all started.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone's fear is an account suspension.
And those started kicking up big time.
Yeah. When one of my clients got suspended, I would just sit and hammer it out all day, every day, figure out as much information as I could, write as many appeals, just to get them back on as quickly as possible. and it was less of a thing in those days to, a lot of sellers were writing it themselves, but they were guessing. They were wildly guessing. They had no, I guess sellers are still doing that to a degree. But the mass influx of suspended sellers hit me, I would say, spring of 2015. So,
And then
yeah.
fall of 2016, incentivized reviews went away. And is that when you started seeing an uptick in reviews abuse cases?
Oh, reviews abuse. That's a good question. I was already dealing with those before that. The Amazon hadn't really organized how they wanted to do those suspensions, I would say, until 2016. And then by 2017, I started seeing that early peak of tons and tons of people getting suspended for it. Rise in all kinds of suspensions, infringement claims suspensions, just reseller suspensions, but also private label guys were dropping like flies because of the reviews abuse stuff, where they were, you remember these days, sending those messages, just coaxing people to leave a positive only review.
Yeah, my family will starve and I'll be so sad. Please, please leave me a positive review. If you had a good
small
experience.
Family-owned business.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Well, and then it got even
things
stricter.
About pets, like pictures of their pets, like you're helping us feed our pets, all the tearjerker stuff. But generally, yeah, like we will not survive as a business without you, like laying that burden on the shoulders of the person who bought from you. And over time, Amazon decided that was a pretty bad way to go about it.
Well, and that's when you and I embarked on this journey to educate and inform on how you cannot break the rules when you're requesting reviews. Because at that time I was at Ecom Engine, and Feedback 5 was we wanted all of our Feedback 5 customers to be compliant, and Ecom Engine still to this day really, really champions compliance and does a great job with that, and works with you on that. But that's what you and I kind of like went on tour talking about that everywhere.
We talked at Prosper, but a good side note is the meetup we did here in Boston, where you flew up and you were a guest speaker, is to this day our best attended meetup. So we rolled out the Rockstar red carpet for you, and we booked that room in the hotel, if you remember, in the Seaport. Anyone who ever comes to Boston, the Seaport doesn't really look like Boston. It's sort of like manufactured to be kind of a, fancy new district. But the good news was we found a hotel actually right near your Ecommetrics offices.
And that's before I was even with Ecommetrics.
I know, before you even there, and you attracted quite the crowd. That was,
there was also a robot, so I don't know if it was me or the robot.
The robot, yeah.
We promised robots.
You can include the picture I took of Leah with the robot.
That's a great picture of Leah. Let's talk a little bit about Leah, because Leah is awesome. So Leah McCabe works closely with Chris at eCommerceChris, and tell me, let's just talk about how great Leah is for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Leah and I first talking, she's half Australian, so we were first talking about e-commerce, not necessarily Amazon. She had managed a startup's Amazon account and business when she was here in Boston, but at the time she was back in Australia, and she was kind of going back and forth. So I got some help from her on my website, which, like I said, back in the old days was not looking that great. It was kind of just a website to be a website. Here's how to reach Chris. Here's some basic info. Have a nice day. But yeah, I mean, she's a good example of somebody who maybe hasn't been employed by Amazon, but knows some Amazon core principles. Core suspension causes backwards and forwards, like listing compliance, things like ASIN variations, things like what can you say in a listing, what can you not. She knows
I don't think anybody in the whole world knows as much about ASIN variations as Leah does.
She knows that stuff cold and better than I do. And it's just great. That was just a fortuitous connection that came in the world of e-commerce. Like I said, she was managing, not at that time, but she had managed an Amazon business. And sometimes just in the world of e-commerce consultants, floating around, doing different things, traveling, you meet people that are really smart, and that some of them sell on Amazon, some of them help sellers, but there's a lot of good minds out there. and it's also not necessarily the loudest voice that represents the most knowledge or information or the most omnipresent people. This is, one of the pet peeves I've had about this industry, if you want to call it that, is that sometimes the people that are easiest to find or that have the loudest voices are not the ones that represent the most knowledge that will help you either build a business or protect a business, safeguard it. But I'm glad we were talking about the meetup because you and I are going to do some pretty good things with the Boston-based meetup, because right now meetups are virtual and they're kind of like for everybody, whether you're traipsing through Boston or not, right?
Yeah, but when the world opens back up, we're gonna party in Boston. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
But until then, I think we're gonna have a couple of us speak at a meetup. But we're gonna have Jason Boyce and Rick Cesari on a meetup,
Exactly.
which will be super fun. They wrote the Amazon
We need to
Jungle
interview
book.
them about their book. The Amazon Jungle.
Chris and I have a book club about that book. We both
I know. Well, we almost kind of need to have like an Amazon book club, not even, or just like business building, like smart business building, because one thing that's changed since I left Amazon, this is a big point I make in a lot of these conversations, is that Amazon has grown and expanded to the point where they feel like they don't need certain kinds of sellers anymore. And that's like the opposite of the way it was when I was there, when they were building. Now they feel like they're still building, they're always building and expanding, but now they feel like they've built it, like the core pieces of it. And they want, like let's forget Amazon for a second. They want growing businesses, they want successful businesses, they want smart businesses, they want people who know how to invest in their business the right way. They want people who know how to invest in Amazon's expansion into other areas the right way. And that's not necessarily just an Amazon principle. That's just being smart with e-commerce and understanding how to protect something you built, but also, how to do it their way. Like if you've done things your way in the brick and mortar world or on your own e-commerce site, it's like, that's great. That's a foundation for maybe kind of understanding how they want to do it. But they run the show. And your marketplace account at this point, you've probably invested so much into it that you can't just forget it at some point. And that's why when you get suspended, it's like you got to get that thing reinstated as soon as possible. How many conversations do you or I have with sellers who are like, oh, Amazon's nice, but well, kind of a hassle, kind of don't want to. I mean, those are people that haven't really invested yet, right?
Or haven't been doing it for long enough that, although I've talked to people lately who like, I just can't set up an account. So
they haven't.
It's not as easy anymore. Well, it's just not as easy. I mean, incentivized reviews and reselling has gotten so much harder, like you mentioned. I mean, when I first started, I worked with a friend of a friend who became a very, very, very good friend and mentor who was doing retail and online arbitrage. So that's how I learned about Seller Central. That's how I learned about FBA, was going around with the seller app, scanning stuff at stores, and then all of a sudden invoices are required, and it's just a whole different world, and it's going to continue to evolve and change, I think. But
that's the thing, and some sellers don't change with it or don't adapt. I mean, the heyday of like you said, retail arbitrage is now years and years in our past.
There's still some people killing it with that model.
Oh yeah. Any kind of, I mean, there's still, drop shipping's been purged. There's still some drop shippers killing it. There's still some large arbitrage accounts, and it depends on your perspective. There are people who are like, well, I'm doing better at arbitrage than I did at the job I had before that I quit to do I get that, depends on what your perspective is, and it's relative. But what are they looking for in the future? I mean, down the road, they're going to be like, it's going to be a consolidation. There's going to be bigger accounts, bigger sellers on each listing in each category. It's not, unfortunately, I have to say, I think it's not going to be as much of the smaller business, smaller account, smaller operation. Filling in certain gaps, certain blanks, yes, but not.
Oh, and I think there's absolutely still plenty of room for small and emerging brands that are, because they've got their own products, they've got their own
If you hit the ground running, but the slow kind of I think you need to hit the ground running, and you need to have solid year-over-year growth, and you need to be in that in club, as opposed to like, well, we're making a nice living, we're going to stand pat, and we're going to just try to do the same amount year over year as long as our costs don't go up, whatever. That's not the conversation anymore. It's like, sure, you started a brand, but do some, in the early days at least, do some doubling and tripling of your revenue year over year by smart marketing and by using ads the right way. I mean, ads are going to be a major frontier for success versus failure in the next 2 to 3 years, I think.
Oh, and they have been already.
And another great thing about just having read the book that Jason Boyce and Rick Cesare did, videos and off Amazon marketing, not just on Amazon marketing. I mean, both ads on Amazon are still going to matter, but I mean, how you coincide those two forces, off Amazon marketing and videos and social media and influencers. I mean, you have to do it the right way. You can't just say, hey, have a bunch of free product and make a video for me and then leave me a bunch of positive reviews. Obviously, that's like overly aggressive, but the right strategies are going to make the difference. The right marketing strategies.
Well, and trusting the right people in the industry as your mentors, as your resources, as your software, as your contacts is very important. That's one of the reasons that I do this series, is to say, I don't know if I'm pointing the right way. This guy.
Only point up. Yeah.
But you're not.
I'm next to you. I'm next to you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, am I up and down for you?
Yeah, I'm a little square at the top of my screen. Maybe I'm yeah.
We have to record in gallery mode, otherwise the other one would be tiny.
I see you, and I see George Harrison behind your head, and I see Ringo.
And Ringo. And if we tilt up a little, we see
a little bit of Paul and a little bit of John.
Yeah, man. Jonathan Hirsch, Richmond, Virginia based.
By the way, we're only a few days away from the 40th anniversary of John Lennon's death in New York. I don't know if you realize that.
I do realize that.
December 7th, 1980, I believe. It might be the 8th. Yeah.
I'm not going to Google while we're recording.
No, don't Google now. That can happen later.
Can Google later.
But no, you should do more of these. This is an enjoyable, somewhat relaxed experience of talking about e-commerce background.
That's all the gin you drank earlier. I'm just kidding.
Not just the, at 11:30. Not just the same old Amazon. I mean, this is worth talking about for a minute. Like, a lot of content out there is regurgitating the same stuff over and over. And maybe we're all guilty of that to an extent, but sellers, I think, really engage fresh content that's innovative and interesting. And this is a good time to be doing something like this. So
I figure it's the holidays, it's cold outside.
No, just generally speaking, I'm sure you'll do a bunch of these interviews in 2021. That's the way to go, because people are willing to engage with the right kind of content.
Well, so if you're an industry professional and you want people to know your story, you can contact me. If you want to contact Chris, his link is going to be in the video description, in the write-up on our website. I like to end these with a couple of personal questions. To make people super uncomfortable, because that's my favorite. Yeah. So I'll lob an easy one at you, Chris. What's your favorite movie?
I can't give you one,
fine.
But I'll tell you something funny. Almost all of the movies I love are one-word titles. So like the movie Network from the 70s. Have you seen that?
Absolutely.
One word. I like the movie Adaptation, that thing with Nicolas Cage and Meryl Streep.
It's a weird one.
One word.
So are those your favorites? Or?
Wait a minute. I love Office Space, but can that be one word, or is that two?
No, it's two words.
Two. Okay. Yeah. And I like the movie Margin Call. Okay, that's 2 words.
One or two words then.
If you gave me a second, I would tell you like 6 other titles that are only one word, reliably. Yeah.
I don't think any of my favorite movies are just one word.
I like Network is usually my pat answer, because I know that's like kind of a social commentary on media and news and people trying to attract eyeballs in any way possible. And that was kind of new in those days. Maybe that's old hat today, but that's
a classic now.
Well, the newsman who loses it on the air and starts screaming, "I'm mad as hell," and I'm not
I'm
going to
not
take
gonna
this
take it
anymore. And then anyone who's seen this, if you haven't seen it, I can send you maybe a little clip of it on
No,
YouTube.
we'll put a link in the video to the IMDb.
What I'm referring to is he encourages everyone to open their window and scream the same thing out their window. And of course, then you cut to New York City. Everyone all over Manhattan is doing this and screaming, "I'm mad as hell." And when I see that movie now, I think of Amazon sellers. Like, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take this anymore. And that's like what I have every day in my email inbox and the phone conversations I have with consults. Sellers are just like, sometimes they don't really mean that they're not going to take it anymore. They're staying with Amazon, but they're definitely serious about being mad as hell at reading these generic canned messages, or not getting responses at all from seller performance, or getting responses that make no sense and have nothing to do with their problem, or having trouble having their plan of action that they spent all day writing, getting properly reviewed, let alone getting reinstated to sell. Now I think of sellers every time I see that scene in that movie or that clip.
I think that's really powerful, and it's just more of a statement to how it's all of us as service providers and consultants in the industry to work together to advocate for sellers on the Amazon marketplace, because they do need help, because Amazon's growing so fast that processes are in place, machine learning's in place, that's not paying close enough attention to the third-party seller. So that's what we're here for. One more awkward question.
Yeah,
it's not going to be awkward.
Make me blush for this. That was too easy. Make me blush.
I already know the answer. This is easy. So what's your favorite outdoor activity?
Mostly easy. I'll just say like hiking, I guess.
And what is the coolest place you've ever hiked?
Oh, wow. That is...
You can name your top 3.
I have a secret country that I love that I don't talk about, because I went there thinking like, oh, it's going to be crowded, and there weren't that many people. So number 3 will be a black box of, I can't tell you, but it was very steep hiking, very mountainous region. That'll be my kind of curious answer, I guess. I can tell some people privately, but I can't announce it to the world because I want to keep it. I'm selfish. I don't want to share everything. I want to keep that for myself.
It's your best kept secret.
Number 1 would be New Zealand. I've been there more than a couple of times, I guess now. And I did a lot of great hiking in New Zealand. You can do great hiking in New Zealand on the North Island and the South Island. So for those of you who have enough time to go for at least a few weeks, try to do both. And then what would be my number 2?
You also held an enormous cat in New Zealand.
I held a Maine Coon. That was on the North Island. That was near Lake Taupo.
That was giganimous.
Yeah, in a previous visit, Taupo is known as the skydiving capital of the world. I wonder if it still is. It used to be like 30,000 jumps a year. That's the only time I went skydiving, was in New Zealand, which was crazy scary. The scary part, of course, was the part in the plane before you even jump out the door, just thinking about what you're about to do. So that's 2, and one of them wasn't really an answer. One of them was in Europe. I'll just say Scandinavia. Spend time in Scandinavia if you can. The best place I've ever hiked. Am I taking too long to answer this?
No.
I mean, so the Prosper show gets me to Vegas, which puts me next to Utah. So every year I go to Prosper. I go to Utah for 10 or 12 days, hike either on either side of the conference, but hiking in the canyons or hiking, I don't know, different parks. I mean, I've been to Arches, I've been to Capitol Reef, I've been to Grand Staircase Escalante, and what's the one I'm missing? Canyonlands. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's great stuff. I love Utah, and I'm glad that they're putting a lot of effort into protecting those lands so that people aren't going to start developing them when you're there. I mean, whoever's already been there, you go to some of these places, there's nobody. If you go to the right places, there's nobody for miles, and you look around thinking, man, I hope this just stays this way for eternity, because it's so nice.
The colors are just, I've never been, but from your photos, just the colors are amazing.
I mean, Prosper is usually, I think it's always in March, not this coming year, but in March there's fewer people. So you can kind of go and have some of these trails to yourself at the right time of day, which is just those are some of the best experiences I've had.
Pro tip.
Yes.
Chris, I think we could probably talk for a whole nother hour, but we're going to
And
wrap
we
it up
should.
now. And we will.
But
Again,
not today.
not today. It's Friday.
Yep.
Maybe not while you're watching this, but it's a Friday for us. So
Yes.
thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure. I am sure I'll talk to you soon, but if you need to get in touch with Chris, eCommerceChris.com, connect with him on LinkedIn, send him your questions. He is the guy to go to if you've got an ASIN suspension, an account suspension, a wonky thing going on with Amazon. He'll help you figure it out. So thank you, Chris.
Will do. Thank you so much. Talk to you
Bye,
soon.
everybody.